Hey guys, in today's video you will learn about the powerful testimony of Martha Coleman, a woman who died for a few minutes and had a real encounter with Jesus. There, she received an urgent revelation about the future, something scheduled for April 22nd, 2025. What she saw on the other side was chilling, so leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell and comment below which city you are watching, because this message needs to reach the entire world. Now get ready. This is going to touch your soul. My name is Martha Coleman. I'm 58 years old and live in Jackson, Mississippi. For most of my life, I was an ordinary woman, wife, mother, healthcare worker. I went to church on Sundays, prayed when I needed to, but honestly, I lived on autopilot, with my soul asleep. I never imagined that my heart would stop in the middle of a dark road, and that when crossing the veil of death, Jesus himself would speak to me about the future of the world. It was a rainy night, February 11th, 2025. I was returning from a church prayer vigil when a truck skidded and hit my car. The impact was brutal. My body was thrown against the dashboard and my head hit the steering wheel hard. I didn't hear sirens. I didn't see anyone running. The only thing I felt was a deep silence. And then, the darkness. But I didn't stay there for long. I felt like my body was floating out of the car. Suddenly, I was above the scene of the accident, seeing my own body lying inert on the asphalt. An immense void surrounded me, but it was soon filled by a golden, warm, living light. This light didn't just illuminate and it spoke. She called me by name. Martha, the time has come to see. I don't know how long I was gone. There were no clocks there. There was no time. What I can tell you is that moment was more real than anything I've experienced in my entire life. After I left my body on that dark road, I was enveloped by a space that I cannot describe in human words. It wasn't heaven yet, but it wasn't earth either. It was like an anteroom to eternity, a place of transition. Everything around was enveloped by a golden light, almost liquid, which vibrated as if it had a life of its own. That light wasn't made of energy. It was made of presence. And then I heard a sound. Not an external sound, but something that crossed my spirit. It was a voice that came not from outside, but from within, from all directions at once. She said, "My name, Martha." I felt my legs weaken even though I didn't even have a body there. I saw myself standing in front of a field of glass as if standing on something sacred, fragile, and eternal. All around there were no walls, but infinite space. And just ahead, he appeared. Era Jesus. I know it's a name said so many times, but there in that dimension, he was not just a religious figure, he was the center of everything. He walked towards me. Bare feet touched the light floor. His clothes were like mist made of glory, and his eyes, oh, the eyes that knew everything about me and still loved me. You need to see what's coming. When he extended his hand, we were transported to another scenario. In the blink of an eye, we were in an immense spiritual plane where the sky was as dark as ink, but cut by a ray of heavenly light. And then he showed me. I saw crowds blindfolded walking in circles. I saw churches full of people and empty of glory. I saw young people playing with sin as if it were a toy, adults trading their faith for comfort, tired leaders, and the most painful, a silence in the heavens. At that moment, Jesus said something that made me shudder. On April 22nd, 2025, I will pass among mine again, but I will not look for walls. I will look for hearts. That phrase entered me like an arrow, and I saw the scene change once again. Now I saw a map, as if observing the world from above. And about him, a flame lit here, another there, scattered in various corners, houses, rooms, prisons, hospitals. But then, the clock in heaven sounded. It was like an invisible trumpet, and when it echoed, some of these flames grew and illuminated everything around. and others went out instantly. I felt a weight in my chest. Jesus turned to me and said, "This is the time. This is the last call for many. Say that I will come. Say that I will seek those who still love me in spirit and in truth. On April 22nd, something will move. Something will be sealed." I wanted to ask what it would be. I wanted to scream, cry, ask for details. But I couldn't say a word. My mouth was silent, but my spirit was crying. Now you know, and therefore you can no longer live as if you didn't know. He touched my forehead with 2 fingers. A wave of heat passed through my essence, and in the next instant, the light began to go out, everything disappeared. But the date was engraved inside me like fire in stone. April 2025. The light around me began to pulse, as if it were breathing with me. There were no walls, but at the same time I felt like I was part of something bigger than the universe. After that touch of Jesus on my forehead, I felt my spirit expand, as if suddenly I could feel the pain of the world and the longing for heaven at the same time. He led me along a path that was not made of ground, but of memories and cry. And then we entered a place that took my breath away, if I was still breathing there. It was like an infinite cathedral, but without walls. Everything was made up of echoes, light and voices intertwined. "This is the place where prayers wait," he said, looking around with an expression that mixed sadness and hope. The prayers, I saw each one of them as if they were threads of light rising to the heavens. Some glowed brightly, others were almost extinguished. Some were as thick and dense as ropes, others as thin as strands of hair. And suddenly I understood. They were the intentions of human hearts. Some were loaded with faith, others with despair. Others were mechanical, without a soul. We walked in silence, and the further we walked, the more I felt a weight growing in the air, a weight of urgency. Jesus stopped in front of one thread in particular, which trembled as if it were about to break. He looked at me and said, "This is the cry of a pastor who no longer believes that I still speak. He preaches, but his heart is empty, and yet I still listen." And then I saw it. He reached out, touched the thread, and it lit up like a revived flame. At that moment, I cried like a child, because I understood that even those who have given up, he still tries to reach. Even the ones that have gone cold, he still visits. "But time is running out," he said, his voice deeper now. "The world is about to go through a spiritual night, and few will have their lamps on." Then I saw a clock, but it wasn't like ours. It spun strangely as if time and eternity were dancing together. And suddenly, he stopped. Marked 22 April. And next to the date, a single word written in fire: separation. "Martha, this date is not symbolic. It is a summons. Many expect me to come with thunder, but I will come like a whisper, and only the sensitive will recognize me." My soul shrank, as if a sacred weight was passing through. I saw millions of people distracted, running, living, without realizing that something eternal is about to happen. Jesus turned to me once again. His face was serious now. "You saw what you needed to see, and when you come back, don't forget. The key is not in the crowd. It is in the secret room. Those who wait for me with an open heart will see me." And then a wind cut everything around me, as if the entire sky took a deep breath. I felt like something was ending. And in the distance I heard that trumpet again, not of war, but of announcement. Heaven was calling. And the day already had a name: April 22nd. Soon after the sound of the trumpet dissipated, Jesus led me again, and this time, we went down what looked like a corridor made of liquid crystal. It was like crossing a river suspended in the sky, where the walls changed shape as we passed, until we entered a new environment. And there, my soul fell completely silent. It was what he called the room of those who sleep awake. The environment looked like a large empty auditorium, but full of immobile people. They were sitting on benches, with their eyes open, but completely inert, as if looked, but didn't see. They weren't dead. They were disconnected. It was impossible not to feel the anguish floating in the air. It was like walking through a field where the spirit had cried out, but no one had responded. They know my name, but they have forgotten. My voice, said Jesus with a painful look. They sing, they preach, they work, but they no longer wait for me. And April 22nd will be like a thief for them. At that moment, I saw a large curtain of mist rising over the room. Some of those who were there began to move slowly. It was as if something was trying to wake them up, but others remained motionless. And suddenly, an invisible line separated them. Those who moved were enveloped by a light, almost imperceptible breeze. I saw their faces light up. The others were swallowed by the darkness that crept up the walls. It was there that I understood. The revival that would come would not be collective, it would be personal. It wouldn't be noisy. It would be silent, like an unexpected visitor in the middle of the night. I will come as in that garden when I called Mary by name, he said. And only those who have awakened ears will hear my voice. I looked at the people in the room again. There were faces I recognized. Good people, church people, friends. I felt deep pain. It wasn't fear, it was urgency. The kind of urgency that tears you up inside. The kind of urgency that comes when you know that time is not running out. It is already over. Tell them, it is still time to seek me. But the time for distraction is over. Heaven is no longer silent. At that moment, I heard a deep sound coming from below, a noise that made the floor vibrate. It was as if the entire spiritual world was moving. And then I saw the date once again, 22 April to 2025. She appeared in the sky above us, written in a line of fire that crossed the clouds, and next to it, a single word. Wake up. Jesus looked at me and said, this will be the last call for many. I will visit those who still wait for me even in silence, even in fear, even in tears, and where there is repentance, there I will be. The words echoed in me like sacred bells. At that moment, I didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay there. But something inside me said, the mission is not over. Yet, heaven was counting down. And I was just beginning to understand the weight of what was being revealed. After crossing the room of sleepers, Jesus took me to a place that seemed to be suspended between two worlds. It was as if we were between earth and heaven, in a space where time bowed before eternity. There everything was silent, but not an empty silence. It was a loaded silence like what precedes a storm, or what comes right before a miracle. Before us, a valley opened up. It was dark, but in the distance, little points of light flickered, like lamps scattered in the darkness. They were not organized in churches or cities. They were in bedrooms, basements, wheelchairs, prisons, deserts, caves, anonymous people, many forgotten by the world. But your lights, they glowed. Jesus stopped, contemplating that scene, and said, these are the ones who still wait for me. I felt something like a gentle fire rise through my soul. It was as if every light contained a secret prayer, a hidden tear, a stubborn faith that never erased. He continued, they are not the most popular, nor the most followed. They are the ones who, when everyone sleeps, still seek me. These will hear my call on April 22nd. The image changed again. Now I saw these same people, in the same place, bending your knees at the same time. It was like an invisible call touched them simultaneously. No fanfare, no campaign, just hearts that knew how to recognize the sound of eternity. Then a dark mist tried to approach them, but it was unable to touch them. The flames enveloped them like living shields, and I understood that what protected them was neither knowledge nor position, It was intimacy. Jesus pointed to one of these lights, which was brighter than the others. I saw an elderly woman, alone, in a small room with the Bible on her lap. She murmured a simple prayer, her hand shaking but full of faith. And he said, "The whole sky moves when she prays." I was overcome by a deep cry, the kind of crying that doesn't come from the eyes but from the soul. In that valley, I understood that heaven does not measure greatness like men. There, what matters is not the volume, it's the delivery. And once again, the date appeared. To April 2025. This time, written in the water of a river that ran through the valley. The waters shone like liquid silver, and in the reflection, I saw the faces of those who would be touched that day. "On that day I will pass among mine," Jesus said firmly, "and I will separate those who have their own light from those who only reflect the brightness of others." I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg the world to see what I saw. But he knew he couldn't. Not yet. The revelation was being sealed within me like a fire that does not consume but transforms. And a certainty grew in my spirit. Something supernatural is scheduled for April 22nd. I don't know how, but in an instant, everything around me changed again. It was as if Jesus' every word had the power to shape the space itself. Now we were faced with an immense hall, made of living crystal, where every wall seemed to pulse with divine energy. In the center there was a scale that was not physical. It was made of light. Jesus looked at me seriously. "Few understand this, Martha, but each heart carries a measure of light, and the light will be tested." That scale started working. Every moment, a beam appeared before us. It was as if souls were being weighed there, not because of what they did, but because of how much light they carried. Some rose light and pure, others sank, as if the absence of light was weight. I was shaking just watching it. And then something even more unsettling happened. We entire churches forming at a distance. I saw beautiful buildings, full of gold, music, technique, speeches. But when their lights were measured, they were pale, opaque, almost non-existent. In contrast, small groups in humble homes, or even people alone in silence, radiated like spiritual suns. Light is not appearance, Martha. It is presence. On April 22, she will be judged. That sentence tore me up inside. The spiritual weight of that day grew with each revelation. I no longer saw April 22nd as a simple prophetic date. It was a line in time, an invisible divider, between what is true and what is just a facade. Jesus continued, "Many will say they are waiting for me, but they will be too busy when I come. My call will not be heard by those who only follow me from afar." At this moment, the hall was filled with a deep sound, like 1,000 bells ringing at the same time. It was beautiful and scary. And in the sky, a crack of light opened. From it, a kind of parchment came down, also made of light. Vivid letters began to write themselves on it, and I only read the beginning. "Those who will hear me on April 22nd. The rest was hidden from my eyes." "You don't need to know everything," he said tenderly. "But you need to remember, you need to keep this alive, because this date will be the sound of a portal opening or closing." I stood there paralyzed. I felt like my spirit was being shaped to carry that forever. The sound of the bells stopped. The hall went dark, and what remained was one last sentence said with so much love that still resonates with me today. "The light will be heavy, and those who still have oil in their lamps will see my face." It was then that I realized April 22nd will not be like the others, and nothing, absolutely nothing, will be the same after him. The atmosphere changed again. Now everything was covered in a dense, silvery fog that didn't hide, it revealed. It was as if the invisible began to take shape. Jesus and I passed through this fog in silence until, in the center, there appeared a table made of translucent stone. Upon it rested a single book. But it wasn't like the books we know. His cape seemed to be made of the sky, with vivid stars moving across it. And when Jesus approached, the book opened by itself, as if recognizing his presence. "This is the book that only opens once before the end," he told me. My legs shook, or my soul. It was like being in front of something too sacred to touch, but at the same time impossible to ignore. The pages began to move one by one, revealing vivid images, as if entire stories were being told through visions. And we people kneeling, crying out in despair. We entire nations in silence as if something had cut through the noise of the world. We skies opening over forgotten places, AV children with eyes shining with glory, prophesying while the adults watched, astonished. And then, the date appeared again. April 2025, written in light letters right at the top of the page. Below it there was a sentence that seemed alive. "On that day the veil will move, and those who have the eyes of the Spirit open will see." I wanted to ask what exactly would be revealed, but before any words came out of me the scene changed. Now I saw a crowd in front of a huge door. It was not made of wood or iron. It was made of a light so intense that it hurt to look directly. That door was ajar, and I saw that some were running towards him, but others just watched from afar, as if waiting for a clearer signal, a more rational confirmation. Jesus told me firmly, "This door will not open any longer. On April 22nd, it will move. Whoever is awake will enter. Whoever waits too long will stay." That sentence fell on me like silent thunder. I understood there that what is approaching is not just an event, and a divine decision. I'm not calling the perfect ones, Martha. And he replied, looking at me, "These I will never forget." The book began to close. The surrounding light intensified. And at the very moment the last page turned, a drop of fire fell from the sky and touched the center of the table. Everything shook, and I heard once again the phrase that already seemed engraved on me. What will be revealed on April 22nd can no longer be ignored. I knew it wasn't time to leave yet, but I felt like I was getting closer and closer to the end of that heavenly journey, and at the same time, of a new beginning. Right after the book closed, the surrounding atmosphere began to shake. It wasn't a physical earthquake. It was as if the very spiritual foundations were being disturbed. Jesus remained silent, but there was a different weight in the air, a type of gravity that didn't pull the body, but it pulled the soul into something deep and inevitable. The light around dimmed, and little by little, I was transported to a kind of battlefield, but not like in the movies. It was subtle, silent, but every inch of that place was charged with tension. On one side, I saw people blindfolded walking calmly towards an abyss. They sang, they smiled, they talked about the future, but they didn't see the edge of the cliff. On the other side, there were people kneeling, dirty, broken, but with their eyes open. Some were shaking, others cried, but they were all facing the sky. And between these two groups there was the invisible line, almost imperceptible, but which separated two kingdoms in collision. Jesus spoke with a steady voice like calm thunder. "This is the line of the Spirit. Many crossed it without realizing it. Others resist in silence. And on the day 22nd April, it will become visible." Was out of breath. It was as if every previous revelation was preparing me for this moment. I saw then angels around the line, like sentries. They did not speak, but their eyes were fixed on each heart. Not in actions, not in words, but in what was inside. "This will be a day of spiritual separation," he said. "Not between good and bad, but between those who want me and those who just use me. The vision changed again. Now I saw religious leaders trying to cross the line, but when they stepped on it, they were stopped. They talked about God, but the light did not recognize them. Meanwhile, a simple man on his knees on the ground crossed with ease, crying, with his hands on his face, saying, "Have mercy on me." That image stuck with me like a hot iron. Then, the sky darkened, but not of terror, but of reverence. It was like the universe was preparing for a movement that only happens once in many centuries. A wind cut through space, and Jesus said, "The heavens are lowering the veil, and those who are attentive will feel it. On April 22nd, the border will be touched, and no one will remain neutral." I then heard a song coming from far away, soft, pure, simple. It was like a children's choir singing a song of peace, but with a melody that had the power to tear veils. And I understood that those who still maintain a childish heart will see glory. In that field in front of the invisible line, Jesus looked at me one last time before the scene disappeared and said with burning love, "Put it away, Martha, because when you wake up, you'll need to remember every detail. The time is near." And it was then that I felt my spirit start to retreat. The sky still whispered, but the return was already approaching. I felt like I was being pulled back, not violently, but softly. A call that said, "It's not time to stay yet." Even so, Jesus remained by my side. The light around him was no longer the same. It was more intense, more dense, almost impossible to face. "There is still something you need to see," he said, "something that will mark Terra on no certain day." We go up. It was like flying, but without wings, without effort, just being carried by something that knew me better than I knew myself. And then I saw it. From a high point of the spirit, the whole world opened before me like a translucent globe, pulsing as if it had life. The sky above the earth was in motion, not cloudy, not stormy. It was as if the firmament itself was getting ready to descend. And then a portal opened. It wasn't like the ones I imagined. It was circular, golden, silent. And his rows of light descended, like vertical rivers that touched several points on earth at the same time. "This is what will happen on April 22nd, 2025, said Jesus, with a voice of glory. "My spirit will be poured out with surgical precision, not on random multitudes, but on those in a position of surrender." I saw simple houses where the presence of God manifested itself like fire, but a fire that did not destroy, only purified. I saw hospitals filled with such supernatural peace that doctors stopped and cried without understanding why. I saw prisons filled with chants, not because someone preached, but because heaven entered without asking permission. And then, I saw something I will never forget, a small, simple, isolated wooden church, and inside it someone prayed, alone in silence, kneeling on the wooden floor. It was as if the whole world was in chaos. But there, the sky touched the earth. "I will be there," said Jesus, "and in many places like that, many, invisible to the world but eternal to heaven." The portal began to close, but before disappearing completely, a trumpet sounded, but not in sound. She touched inside me, and then I saw my own body. She was lying down, surrounded by paramedics, with her eyes closed and her skin cold. But I wasn't afraid, because now I knew. "You will come back, Martha," he said, "but the fire that is in you will not return with silence." His final words echoed as if they had been carved into my soul. Save the day. Keep the secret. Keep the urgency. What will be poured out on April 22nd will be for those who can still hear the whisper among the noise. And with a gentle breath, I was launched back into what we call life. But part of me never returned, because whoever sees the sky will never walk the same on earth again. The feeling of return was something I can't explain exactly. It wasn't like waking up from a dream. It was more like being pulled into a reality that now seemed smaller, narrower. My spirit was being compressed, pushed back, into my fragile, injured body, lying on the asphalt of that wet road. But before the eyes of the flesh opened, my spiritual eyes still saw one last scene. Jesus walked away slowly, but without turning his face. His eyes remained fixed on mine as if there was still something to be said, something recorded without words. And then he whispered, without moving his lips, "Wait, in prayer." At that moment I understood that nothing more would be revealed, for now. The date was set. Heaven had already spoken, and my role was simply wait, watch, break the silence of the world with the cry of the Spirit. It was then that my eyes opened. The raw light from the ambulance blinded me for a second. Panicked voices, hands squeezing my chest, the muffled sound of sirens in the distance. But inside me, a sacred silence remained. I didn't say anything, nor could it. My mouth was dry. But the heart burned. Memories of the experience have not faded with time. On the contrary, they became clearer. The battlefield, the book that opens, only once the invisible line, the valley of lit lamps, the question that still echoes. Who still waits for me? Really? The world started spinning again. The routine called again. But something inside me was already in another time, counting down. Since that day, every breath carries a whisper from heaven. Every time the sun rises, I remember that there is a portal about to be touched. April 2025. It's not just a date, and a veil that will move silently about those who still bend the knee even when no one is looking. Since my return, there have been no more dreams. No visions, no voices, just the echo of that last sentence. Wait, in prayer. And that's what I do. In the bedroom, in the silence, with the soul on fire. Because something is coming. And nothing will be the same afterwards. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time,